I definitely like have my own set boundaries on how much I want to engage with people, and then recognizing that I definitely need to, reset and conserve my energy sometimes. And so it is important to like kind of establish, boundaries on how much you can engage with people. And I'm happy that more people are understanding that, there's nothing wrong with just saying, I just need to take a break, or I just need to kind of head back to my place or something. And people understand that. And so I think it's, contributes to this larger conversation of taking care of your mental well-being, which is, what I'm really passionate about.
Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of Oh My Curry Goodness. My name is Hamza Islam. On this podcast, I talk to inspiring Gen Zers about their story and the experiences that have shaped them into the person they are today. My goal for each episode of this podcast is that you, the listener, join me in taking a few things away from each guest as we continue to write our own story. And I really want to create a place where guests are able to share their stories, and it reminds people, like whether it's me or you guys, that regardless of who you are or what your background is, you are capable of doing incredible things. Hence the name Oh My Curry Goodness, because there is an element of surprise and an element of I really did this and I can't believe it. And I hope that you can take a few things away and just continue to do what you believe in, and just know that you are able to do special things. I'm very excited about this week. I am talking to Zane Landin, who is a mental health and disability advocate, body positivity proponent, entrepreneur, and positive change maker. He is the founder of Positive Vibes Magazine, a digital magazine dedicated to telling authentic stories about mental health, wellness, and inspiration. When I first heard about Zane, why I was really excited is our passion for storytelling, because storytelling is a very powerful tool, and letting people share their stories in an authentic and honest way helps us understand what it's like to be a human being and what it's like to be in their shoes. So I'm really glad to connect with Zane and share our unique passion when it comes to storytelling. So Zane Landon, thank you so much for joining Oh My Curry Goodness.
Well, thank you so much for having me.
I before you joined this podcast, I told you that I'm a computer science major. And one of the cool things about you is that you are a communication major.
Mhm.
And I want to start talking about that, because why I was excited to speak with you, because you're a very outgoing person. As people have told me, so I was like, okay, this is gonna be a great conversation. But when I meet with communication majors, the thing that sticks out, the first thing, and I know I stereotype, so I don't know where you fit in this, but when I think of communication majors, I think of people who are very outgoing, who love
Mhm.
to talk to people,
Mhm.
who are not the type of people that will give you one or two word answers. Because for me, there's nothing more frustrating than talking to someone that gives you one or two word answers. Um, but if we were to just kind of like look at your life from, like, because this is obviously the first time I'm meeting you,
Mhm.
were you always the outgoing, like was being an outgoing person something that you feel like you've always had in your life, or was that a skill or a trait that you feel like you've picked up along the way? Or it could be neither the two, and it's something that you're still trying to work on. Because I mean, being an outspoken person, being a person that's just willing to share their stories, it's still a challenge at the end of the day.
Yeah, I appreciate the question, and I do think it's a misconception. I know many communicators because I work with many that are not outgoing people, which is fine because to be an effective communicator, you don't just need to be outgoing, and you also don't need to just be a good writer. A lot of people think that to be a good communicator, you need to be a good writer. No, being a good writer is one aspect of being an effective communicator. You need to do a lot more things like analyzing data, analyzing your audiences. There's a lot of different things you need to do as a communicator before, and not just being outgoing. But to answer your question, of course, there's still a lot of outgoing communicators, and you see a lot of communications people on the forefront, and that's why. But for me, I feel like it always escalated. I never felt like I was completely outgoing. Like I felt like there was waves in my life where I felt outgoing, I felt more introverted, then I felt a lot more extroverted. Now I feel like even with the impact of COVID on my social life, I feel like I didn't define myself now as like an ambivert, which is like again, I feel like that was just the term that they created for people who describe as both, but I guess there was no term, so they decided to create one. I guess it's better to have terminology than saying, oh, I'm both. So that is how I identify now, especially after COVID, because my social life was really impacted. Now it's like I definitely like have my own set boundaries on how much I want to engage with people, and then recognizing that I definitely need to, reset and conserve my energy sometimes. And so it is important to like kind of establish, boundaries on how much you can engage with people. And I'm happy that more people are understanding that, there's nothing wrong with just saying, I just need to take a break, or I just need to kind of head back to my place or something. And people understand that. And so I think it's, contributes to this larger conversation of taking care of your mental well-being, which is, what I'm really passionate about.
I feel that I'm in the same boat as you in the sense that I think for a long time I was a very outgoing person, but then after the pandemic, now I'm very conservative as far as
Yeah,
when to talk and when not to talk.
right.
Um, I think when I went to college, I think if there's one thing that I wish I did more of, because I'm still a college student, is to be more to participate in organizations and activities. Just
Mm,
because nowadays it's like people have chosen their groups. So like if you want to try to join their group, they kind of look at you weird and go, "Why weren't you there in the beginning?" And so also you because sometimes at Ohio State, and maybe this is I don't know if you're still in school, but there are times where you will meet people that are, I guess, very, I don't want to call it arrogant, but they're very like closed-minded people. So you'll meet with them, and then after that conversation, you might feel you had a great conversation, but they might feel like, who on earth is this guy trying to talk to me? And I've had that experience. So that's why I'm one of those people like you, where it's like I like to be social on some cases, not so much. But one of the things that I really hope to overcome is just that fear of not caring what people say. So it's
mm.
almost like I'm going to be me. I'm going to be asking questions. I want to engage in conversation. I don't care what you say. If you say anything bad about me, that's more about you than on me. So it's still a journey, but I feel like it's different from it varies from person to person.
It does. And it's easier said than done because like we can imagine those situations. It's a lot harder when, if someone is actually in person saying horrible stuff about you. And as I put myself more out there in the world, especially with some of the media opportunities I've gotten recently, I constantly had this fear that I was going to face a lot of rejection or a lot of people just cutting me off because of certain beliefs that I have. And so luckily that didn't happen. In fact, I think people gained more respect because I was more open about my opinions, and my opinions weren't even controversial. I thought they were, but they really weren't. When I was thinking about where I was on the spectrum of things, but it was a super exciting opportunity, and I'm really happy with the people that I met through that process.
Before we talk about positivity, because that's something you care a lot about, I do
Yeah.
want to ask, is there a trait or a characteristic in you that you feel like has stuck with you since, or has stuck with you for a very long time? So for example, as someone who finally gets to create this podcast, something I have been really curious about since I was little was just my curiosity about human beings.
Yeah.
And I think that comes from being a soccer fan. One of my favorite things to do was every year my favorite soccer team, Columbus Crew, would have their meet the team, get to meet all the players, get to meet all the coaches. And when I was little, just by being able to hang out with them for like 1 or 2 minutes, it kind of sparked my curiosity a bit. Like, what is it like to be an athlete? Because I had this dream of becoming a professional athlete. Spoiler alert, that didn't go well. But nevertheless, just that curiosity of what it's like to be so and so or another person, that was something that I feel like has been with me since I was little. So for you, what characteristic or trait do you feel like has stuck with you since, or stuck with you for a long time?
Wow. Yeah, I think there's a lot of things, a lot of characteristics, but I think the one that I think is the most important is just like the pure kindness that I try to bestow on people. And that was the one thing that my mother always taught me, was to always be kind to others, treat others as if how you want to be treated. I understand that that is like the cliche stereotype golden rule that we all kind of have heard, but I think some of the cliche messages we need to hear all the time. because I think that people do forget that. I think actually we talk about some of these messages, we're tired of hearing about the cliche messages, but it's like, but they're actually like really important, especially that one. I think people forget it often. And I just see so many acts in this world of just hatred or violence, and I just don't understand how we stray so far from kindness. I'm not saying the world was better years ago or anything like that. I don't know if there ever was a time where you can look back where kindness was at a peak. No, I don't think so. But I wonder how we can get closer to that. So that's the one thing that I've noticed, is that despite everything in my life that has changed, despite if my values have changed, or my opinions or how I look, whatever it is, things change. But a constant state has always been the kindness I show on others. And that's one thing I'm always gonna carry with me forever. Yeah.
Yeah, wow. I love that's such a great answer, and I'm not gonna lie, sometimes I struggle to try to being kind.
Mm-hmm.
It's another challenge because it's so easy, like you said in the beginning, it's so much easier said than done.
Mm-hmm.
Being kind, especially when things don't go your way, is a challenge. And I do want to touch on the kindness part at some point later on, but I really do want to talk. I want to talk about positivity because it's another thing that is much easier said than done.
Yeah.
And you describe yourself as a positive change maker, and
Mm-hmm.
people hearing you for the first time might have this weird misconception that, oh, Zane is saying this, but he's probably never experienced any sort of negativity, challenge, obstacle.
Yeah.
Like life has been great, and you've talked a bit about how in the past you've experienced things like bullying and mental health challenges, and then you talked about how you lost your mom who
Mm-hmm.
meant so much to you. And it's very hard when going through different experiences like mental health challenges, bullying, losing someone that you care about so much. It's so hard to find the light at the end of the tunnel. It's so hard to
Yeah.
find that positivity. Obviously, maybe there's someone listening out there, or maybe someone out in the world that may not resonate with your story 100%, or maybe they
Right.
didn't experience all three of these things.
Mm-hmm.
What I do want to ask is, this is a broad question, so it's a difficult question, but how do you still try to find the light at the end of the tunnel? How do you still try to tell yourself that something good will come out? I don't mean to make it that sounded inappropriate, but it's like, how do you
Mm-hmm.
try to find hope?
Yeah.
I don't know, that's such a weird way of saying it, but it's like, you think that when the negative event happens to you, it's so hard to find the positive, find hope, but you can find it. It's just it is difficult because depending on what that negativity was and how much it impacted you, it is hard to find a way to maneuver out of that.
Yeah, it's interesting. And I've heard some interesting views on hope and how some people think it's just a way for us to reach for the light when it's not there. So kind of a pessimistic view about hope. But I do think it can even if it's something that you may never see, because some people unfortunately will not see the light. I hope they can get close to it. And what does that even mean? Seeing the light. What does that exactly mean? Have I seen it? I don't know. Especially we're looking at such a black and white view of like, this is the light, this is not. I think there's like, that middle area where you have to find yourself and look at yourself and kind of just question, things about yourself and what kind of life do you want? And so, that is one thing I will say, people listening, that hasn't happened to me only like maybe once or twice with people questioning what I've gone through. They won't. I will be clear with them. They cannot question that. No one can question what you've gone through, unless they really know your story. But it's not anyone's place to tell you what you've been through and how you've experienced it. And I'm here to like totally shut people down on that idea that they can question my life on what's been easy, what hasn't been. So that's one of it. It's like, owning your story. But I don't know. I just think that I understand like the negativity is what we gravitate towards. And that's why, the news industry is so popular and why the news industry is so negative is because us humans, we do gravitate towards the negative. And I had a conversation with someone on why we gravitate towards the negative. I don't know about the science about this, but in my personal opinion, it's because some of the things, like some of the most evil things that have been done, they're like almost incomprehensible. Like, if you think about it, like, it's like, I cannot imagine someone acting like that. Like, I think we can see what pure kindness is. We can see that. But when we look at things that are like pure evil or pure terrorism, we're just like, some of us cannot understand that. So that's why I think sometimes we gravitate towards the negative, because it's so shocking. But anyways, but like I was saying before, like, it's so easy to gravitate towards that negative, but I don't want to like negate the positive things that have happened in my life. You know what I mean? And so even though it's very upsetting that my mom passed away 2 years ago, I still had a good 23 years with her. And even though there's going to be a point in my life where I'm going to say, wow, I'm actually older than how long I've known my mom. I'm not going to do the math right now, but I don't know how old I'm going to be. Well, no, that would be like 46. So I'll be 40. I'll be like 46 when I have to, come to the terms and say, I've been here longer than I've known my mom. It's going to be a probably a hard time, but at that point, I don't know if it will be, because I've already gone through my life without my mom for a long time. And so to me, it's like you kind of just have to find your own purpose. You have to make your own meaning, because I know some people think I have to find my meaning somehow. It's like you can find it, but you also have the power to make it yourself, whatever that means. And so if it's about creating positive memories, or still having conversations with your loved one, or if it's meditating, or if it's I went through a meditation where a spiritual leader actually helped me communicate with my mom. It was a very interesting experience. People can say that that is completely untrue, that that was probably all in my head. Maybe it was, maybe it wasn't. I know it wasn't. And so, even though I went through that, where I had to actually had a conversation with my mom with a guided meditation channeler, that was super interesting. And so it's moments like that where things don't feel coincidental, that things feel like they have a purpose. And so even though me and millions of other people and everyone in this world, every single person is going to go through hard times, I feel like the world is going to constantly feel like it's hard times if we let it feel that way. You know what I mean? And it's like, if you let yourself be clouded in like this sphere of darkness, you're always going to be in bad times, always, if you really have that negative attitude. And so I don't think that positivity is this notion where everything is sunshine and unicorns. That's like positive talk. No, that's toxic positivity, where it's like, where you like really are negating the negative. And of course, the duality of positive and negative, like, you have to have both. And so I don't think you can be a complete person without addressing both. So you can't be this positive person, but you can't just be this blatantly negative person either. And so it's about finding the balance in your emotions, but addressing both. And that, bad things happen, but there still are things in your life that can keep you going. And it's up to you to figure out what those things are, because no one else can do it for you. And if you are relying on other people, that external validation is only going to last a while. And I don't think you can depend on external validation for so long, because again, people come and go in our lives. If that external validation is gone and you're feeling purposeless again, you're going to start from where you started. And so you kind of have to determine it on your own. Doesn't mean you can't get help. That doesn't mean you can't get support from others, but you also have to find that confidence in yourself at the end of the day. And you can't just rely on what other people say. Because again, if we're going to go with this idea that we shouldn't care what other people think, like, I don't care what negative people say. Not that you shouldn't care what positive people say, but again, don't solely rely on it, because what's most important is how you feel about yourself. And I believe in things like manifestation, not completely, but I do think if you can manifest positive thoughts, you're going to have positive outcomes. That doesn't make sense, because for some people that don't believe in manifestation, that doesn't make sense. Like, it's going to be completely random what we experience in our life, right? For what people believe. But I do believe that if you're going to manifest positive thoughts, you're going to see the positivity. And so even if you're like, well, that was completely random, but you're seeing the positivity in that outcome, though, because that outcome is neutral. It's not bad or good. It's how you perceive it. And so if you're perceiving it as a positive outcome, there you go. You're seeing the positive in something, even if it's negative. Like, there are many people I know that will go through a negative consequence. They'll say, well, I really learned something from that and I came out a better person. But that's not for me to tell, because when someone goes through something hard, it's not for us to say that they learned a lesson. That's for them to decide, because that can go into some weird territory you don't want to go into. So that's what I would say about that. I see positivity as a philosophy on like this upward direction to peace. And it doesn't always go upward. It goes in many different directions all the time. It's not going to be, an uphill trajectory. It's going to be quite messy, and it's never going to look like an uphill. It won't.
Absolutely, for sure. You talked about how people come and go in life,
Mhm.
but there are people that stick with you your whole life. And I don't want to talk about your mom too much, but I do want to talk about how she meant so much to you, and you have the spiritual conversation.
Yeah,
I don't relate to you. I have a more indirect relation or indirect thing in common rather than a direct thing, in the sense that when my dad lost his dad, it was really difficult for him. But he does talk about his dad almost every day. And
mhm.
it almost feels like, you know, when he makes a decision, he will think about what his dad will think. And it's somewhat similar to what I do with when it comes to religion. So I mean, I'm Muslim, and sometimes whenever I make a decision, I always think about what will, oh, this is gonna sound really weird if they're not Muslim, but it's like, what will God think about this particular situation? And so when you're kind of finding out your purpose, especially as a mental health activist,
Yeah.
and everything that you're doing, whether it's an entrepreneurial or an activism, do you always feel like there's this, do you always feel, how do I word this? It's like, do you envision that your mom is in a way like there just to kind of like guide you in some sense? I know like we're sounding really philosophical, but there's a sense of like sometimes when you're about to make a decision, even though that the person that you cared about and has guided you is not there, they're in a way still there, and they can somehow put like something in your head that will go, Zane, Hamza, that was the right decision, or Zane, Hamza, that was the wrong decision.
Yeah,
Fix it. Does that make sense?
it does. And my answer is yes, of course. I mean, I may not be deliberately thinking about my mom every decision I'm making.
Yeah,
um,
that's true.
I know
Yeah.
some people do, and you know what? That's great if that's what helps them. But for me, I just don't, especially for some decisions that are not super important, but very important decisions. Yes, I have to definitely ponder what the outcome will be. How my life could change. I think about, is this what I would want my mom to see? Would this make my mom proud? Um, would my mom want me to take this risk? But sometimes I have to think to myself, like, my mom wouldn't want me to take this risk. I don't know. Maybe my mom would like me to play it safe, but I need to take this risk because I also need to challenge myself. And so it's interesting. But I also love that, your dad, talks about his dad openly like that, because I think that, if they're in our thoughts and our minds and our hearts, if we keep them there and we keep them alive, in a way they're still here, and they're even more here than if we forget them, because I think that if we still have memories of them, they're still here in just a kind of a fabric of our mind, but it's still real in a way. I find things, I think I have a weird idea of this, because I was telling my partner this, and I was saying that we were talking about TV shows and stories. He's like they're not real, and I'm like, oh, they're real. I'm like, they're real to me, because not that they're, I know they're not real. Like, I know it's a TV show, but to me, I think that our imagination can create worlds, and that every story we create is real in a different way. So like, it sounds so weird, but like, I'm a huge fan of Harry Potter. I think Harry Potter is real. I think that there is an alternate universe where Harry Potter is real. I think my imagination, where I've created some characters, they're real somewhere too. And I think that one day, when I pass away, I will see them. That's probably so bizarre, but I do think that, and I do think that that's why we have to be careful with the stories we create, because I do think that we are creating people, especially since the stories we think and the people we think of, they're inspirations of other people, right? And so in a way, the characters we create, the stories we write, they are based on a lot of true events or our experiences or people. So it's like almost just like an extension of like our experience, or the people we know and what we've gotten inspiration from. So it's like they're real in a way. I know it's like a weird and weird comparison, but that's how I imagine it. And so that's why stories are so important on just when I consume them, and also that they're real in an essence somewhere else. It's kind of interesting.
For sure. No, I don't think it's awkward. I think it's what you said is really true. And regardless if it's fiction or nonfiction,
Mhm.
they do have They do have meaning. And I know it doesn't resonate with every single movie or TV show. Sometimes it's like they're not really trying to give like a message of some sort,
Mhm.
but there are movies and shows that do have meaning,
Yeah.
regardless if it does affect you or not, or if it if it's personal, or what's it called? If it hits home to you or
Oh
not.
yeah.
That's what I was thinking. And and I really want to transition to this to like the idea of storytelling, because that is something
Yeah.
that you and I share in common. We talked about how there are certain traits and characteristics that we have either developed over time or has been constant.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I want to know, I'm assuming storytelling wasn't something that you had you since for a very long time, or
No.
maybe it has, but I would love to know, and I've asked this guest and it's a repeated question, but I still think it's a question that is valuable, which is the importance of storytelling.
Hmm.
And I want to know specifically from your perspective, what has storytelling done for you? Because
Hmm.
again, everyone has different perspectives, but just being able to share your story, regardless of just being able to share your story without any filter or anything to like, I guess, fictionalize in some sense,
Yeah.
it's one of the best feelings in the world, especially if you don't let the negativity, because there will be people that will think your story is fake or useless, but
Yeah.
being able to share your story and share it with the right people can really make you feel energized, inspired, motivated, and a
Mhm.
sense of relief.
Yeah. So to answer your question, no, storytelling has not always been something I was keen on. It's not something I was always interested in. Of course, I was always inspired by stories. I think it's hard to find someone that's not inspired by storytelling in some way. I mean, almost everything is storytelling. The TV shows you watch, the books, the speech you heard, I don't know, the magazine you read, the commercial you saw, every single thing is about storytelling. And so I think it's very hard to find someone that doesn't resonate with some level of storytelling. Even music is storytelling, art is storytelling, it's all storytelling. And so, no, I hate to admit this, but I'm going to. I didn't like reading growing up. I hated writing growing up. I was terrible at writing. I was really bad. Um, but I think that's because, the education system is kind of hell bent on teaching you a certain way and how to write. And so, there was always a specific way of you need to write this way. And it's like, I can't connect it this way. I really don't understand how to connect it this way and for it to feel like it's flowing here. And so I was always like very scattered when it came to writing. And it wasn't until I can't remember exactly when, but I think it was like a sophomore in high school where I discovered that poetry was a thing. I knew it was a thing, but I didn't realize that, it was something that I wanted to delve into. I don't remember how I got into it. I really don't. Um, but I just kind of started writing how I wanted. And that's storytelling. I think storytelling is when you finally take ownership of your story. Because to me, it's like storytelling is all around us, but when you can tell your own story the way you want, that is like taking ownership of your life and your story. And that's so powerful because no one's telling you how to tell your story and you tell how you want. And of course, people might tell you, oh, this could be how you better your story. This is how you tell it better. This is how we market it better. Whatever it is that people tell you, it's like, but you decide if you want to take that advice or not. It's still your story. Don't let anyone take that away from you. And so, um, yeah, so I discovered poetry and I was just kind of writing how I wanted, comparing things that were completely outrageous. It was like the first time where I was like, this actually does make sense, even though it feels disconnected to you. It feels so connected to me. And me being able to be a creative writer, I'm able to kind of like tap into this field where I can create my own world and things that don't make sense, they do make sense. This is basically like the story of Alice in Wonderland. The things that are outrageous aren't outrageous at all in the story of Alice in Wonderland. And so yeah, that's probably what I would say about that. And so after I became really involved in poetry, I wrote a lot. Then I even like enrolled in this competition called the Scholastic Art and Writing Awards, which is this big scholastic competition. And I wrote every day. Like I'm telling you, I wrote for like 3 hours a day for like every day for like 6 months. That was ridiculous. I don't know how I did that because I don't write as much poetry anymore. I should get back into it. But I wrote so much. I even carried a journal. When someone said a word that I didn't know, or they said a word, and I was like, that sounds really nice. I wrote it down. I think I had like 20 pages of words, not too many. And every time I had a thought, I would just write it down. It's like an inspiration journal. And so, yeah, I wrote so many poems for that competition, but I ended up getting several awards and I was a national silver medalist. And I was so upset because you only got invited to their exclusive event if you got a gold medal. And that was at Carnegie Hall. And that was the first time I was going to travel like that. And so, again, something so upsetting, but it was still a blessing in disguise because that whole process was so rewarding for me to like find my voice as a writer and a speaker. And always loved public speaking, but writing was always very challenging and tricky. But, when I discovered poetry, everything kind of flowed a lot better. And then when I went to university and I had to write essays, I wrote them how I wanted. I wrote them how they made sense. And luckily, in university, they're not super rigid on how you have to write, as long as you cite your sources. But other than that, you could kind of write how you wanted. And so, yeah, that's kind of the story of how I became a storyteller. And I shared my mental health story a lot more, during my time at university where, I had a hard time with a lot of things. I was engaging in self-harm. I had suicidal thoughts. So after all that, then I started sharing my story a lot more. Um, and then even getting into the Mental Health Youth Action Forum, which was this mental health event at the White House. When I got into that, that was an amazing experience where I never even thought I would get somewhere like that at all, like being exclusively invited to the White House, meeting President Biden. And then after that, I was like, even at that point, I still had, I still struggled to see the empowerment of my voice still. Even after all that, I still struggled. And it's still something that, I struggle with today. And it's something that people experience all the time. It's that, you still have to reclaim your voice all the time because there's always those shadows telling you that it's not worth it. And so after that, I finally was like, no, I have this voice. I want to share it more and I deserve to. And so I pitch myself, I tell my story so much more, even more, I find it uncomfortable. But I think sometimes, we have to embrace that uncomfortability because that's where we grow the most.
Like you, I didn't like reading and writing growing up. And I remembered taking the ACT. I don't know, for a lot of colleges now, their ACT, SAT is test optional, which I'm super
Yeah.
jealous of. But
Yeah.
when I remember, so I took the ACT, no joke, I think 9 or 10 times, which was an exhausting 1 year of just taking every exam, every ACT exam. But I remember my first scores. So I think I forget my writing score, but reading was a 16 out of 36. So it was really, really bad. And I had to learn how to analyze text better, figure out how to read things quickly because anyone knows who's taking the ACT or SAT, it can be a time crunch. But my final score, like the last time I took it, I got a 30 on reading. And I think throughout that journey from going through from having a 16, and I'm not bragging in any sense because the ACT is hard for anyone taking it, but I remember just taking that journey. And when I got that 30, I just, for some reason, it came to mind, I should start reading books more. I don't know.
Yeah.
For some reason, I just started picking up that habit of reading text or analyzing text. And if I went back in time, I wish I told my 4 or 5, 6, 7 year old self, start reading books because there are some interesting stories and it opens up your mind, opens up your perspective. I find that it's still a challenge for me to open up perspectives. I don't know why, but I feel like if I was able to develop that habit, I wouldn't have to worry about, I guess, like thinking too much inside my head or like what it like sometimes I feel like I don't know, I feel like I play the victim at times where it's like, oh, this person doesn't like me, or I feel like um what I think is right. But then listening to other people's stories, I know that's kind of irrelevant, but in the sense that listening to other people's stories, learning about other people's stories, it allows you to really understand that life is bigger than what you're probably going through,
Yeah.
if to put it bluntly. So I wanted to say that because I resonate with you, which is reading books took a long time for me
Yeah.
to develop a habit. And writing was a weakness of mine because I think I cared about what others think, and others meaning the teacher or the professor, because it's like you need to write this way or you're not getting 100 out of, or you're not getting 100% or an A. But I think when you do get to college or when you do get to embrace the authentic side of you, you can define success based on what you think is success. And even if other people don't accept it, again, it goes back to the part about authenticity, which is it's coming from you. People can say things like, well, you got to do this better. You might need to market it this way. And I know in the world we live in today, it's all about you need to change a couple of things. Even though it's 100% you, you might need to change a couple of things because people may not like it. And it's like, well, now that's more about you than it's about me. So I'm
Yeah.
going to be authentic regardless of what you do or where I go because it's coming from me and not someone else. I know you were going to say something, so I do apologize.
No, no, it's okay. No, I agree. And again, it's your choice if you want to accept that feedback or not. But if you do get that good feedback, that's great. Because someone is coming from a place of love, hopefully, and wants your story to be out there more. Because you know, there is strategy in telling your story. It's not just you tell it however you want, because that will not go well sometimes. You kind of have to just, again, look at it from the audience you're speaking to. There's so many things you have to look at. And so, um, but yeah, that's what I would say.
I I know that you have your company Positive Vibes Magazine,
Yeah.
but obviously we've talked about on this podcast how you are really passionate about mental health activism, and you also said that as you've been able to as the years have gone by, you've been able to share your stories, share all the like share sides that you may have not been able to have that chance because it's out of fear or just because it you didn't feel like it was the right time.
Yeah.
And now that you're in a position where you've shared your stories about losing your mom, uh, the bullying, the talking about how you had suicidal thoughts,
Hmm.
these are things that I mean, it's sometimes it's very easy to hide because you're worried about what other people say. I
Yeah.
want to ask you, as someone who loves storytelling, tell me a bit about the relationship with the word fear. I want to know, and maybe it can be due to, in large part, because of storytelling or because you've been taking this mental health journey. What are some fears that you feel like you've had that you feel like you've overcome because of your mental health activism or
Mm.
storytelling? And what are some fears that you're currently dealing with now that you hope to overcome in the future?
Okay, so definitely a fear from before that, of course, still prevails today, just not as much, definitely not as much. The fear of rejection, that was a hard one, but the problem was with me is that when people have the fear of rejection, well, not always, but when a lot of people have the fear of rejection, they don't apply for something. They don't, that's what I've noticed, is that they don't go for opportunities because they have the fear of rejection. I was the opposite, where I had the fear of rejection, but I applied for everything. So it's like a self-fulfilling prophecy because I applied for many things that probably weren't even like I didn't even have the experience or qualifications for. Um, so when I wouldn't get something, I would be very frustrated, like very angry. Like I'd be very angry because I just think it's just another opportunity that I'm not getting, and I don't understand what I'm doing wrong because I would internalize it and I would think it's my fault. It's no one's fault actually. It's just how it is. And then I would look at it and be like, well, this just sucks. Like I'm sick of feeling this way. And so what I learned, and I had to learn the hard way, which was I still apply for many things. But now when I don't get something, I'm just like, you know what? It's just not the place for me. It really isn't. And I think that has to do with a lot of things. I don't know how I naturally came out of that. I think just because certain things happened. It felt like a domino effect, or butterfly effect. Probably both. It had to do with like when I applied for this Disney internship and I was very excited for it and I was ready to take it. Um, and they rejected me, and I'm like, it's just very upsetting again. I was like, I worked so hard to get to these places and I'm still not getting there. And then the next day, NASA contacted me about an internship, about an application I submitted 2 months ago. Well, at the time, 2 months ago. And so I was like, wait, what? Like it literally the next day after Disney rejected me, I'm like, no, that feels again not coincidental, like I was talking about before. And so my philosophy is that things that happen, they happen for a reason. And I understand some people have a problem with that because some of the most heinous things that happen to people, we're not talking about that. I'm talking about getting an opportunity. Let's not get into the weeds of terrible things that happen. That's different. I'm talking about, when you get an opportunity or you don't get an opportunity like this. Um, or, I interned at General Motors after I graduated. It was a postgraduate internship. I was gonna get a job there, 100%. They're gonna give me a job until they had a hiring freeze. And then I was set, to a new direction for 3 to 4 months. I finally found my first entry-level job after university at National Geographic. So it's like and I feel very proud and grateful to be where I am right now in this job. And so, yeah, that is just kind of how I've had to learn. It's more of a spiritual learning than anything else. I know some people will take a physical learning away from it and think like, you know, like someone had to teach me this or I took away from this specific moment. But it was more like a lot of things happened and I just kind of learned the spirituality from it. And that also, I gained that from the magazine because the magazine have done so many interviews, and especially with spiritual leaders, and they've given me such interesting insights I never even would have thought of. And so it's opened my mind so much. And that's why I'm so open-minded to anything because it's like, I don't know how I'm supposed to judge when I know I have my own personal bias. We all do. And so it's hard for me to look at a perspective and think that there isn't another possibility. Because even like I know people that are atheists or they're really religious. I'm just like, I get you both. I really do. Like I get how you both have your perspective, but you both have an absolute mindset, which I don't appreciate because it's just so difficult to think that way when there's so many perspectives and so many different truths in this world. It's like who knows what's real? I don't think we'll ever know the answer until we die, in my opinion. And we don't know what that is either. So that's why I always encourage people to be open-minded because there's so many perspectives and we only have one, right? And so it's like just be open to so many different types of people and always be curious about so many different things in the world because there's so many unexplained things that happen in this world.
For sure. I think, yeah, I touching on the fear of rejection, I'm
Mm,
in a similar boat as you. I feel like we have a lot of things in common.
yeah.
But I I'm not afraid to be rejected. Sometimes I like to play this game of like I sometimes I do predict like, oh, it's probably not going to happen or it's probably not going to go my way, and I accept it. But then it gets really hard where when you work on something and you believed that it's going to go your way and you're already envisioning it, you're like, this is how it's going to look on the first day,
Yeah.
this is how it's going to look on the fifth day, and then you
Yeah.
find out that it's not going to happen because they rejected your application. And so at those moments, it's like you think it's the end of the world,
You
but
do.
something and I think the hardest part is knowing that something good will come out of it. Similar to
Yeah.
how you talked about how you didn't get the internship at Disney, but then the next day you got an internship at NASA. And so
Yeah.
for a lot of people, that something good will come out of it, I think is really hard.
It
And I think it's
is.
just a matter of just trusting the process because something like I don't want to say something good will come out of it because that you can't just it doesn't work. Like there could have been no way that you would have known that the very next day NASA
No.
was going to send you an app or an internship. But it is one of those things where you somehow have to trust the process and knowing that it hurts now, but it will be good later, regardless
And
of how many times. Yeah,
that's exactly what positivity is, in my opinion. I know some people have different ideas of what positivity is, but that's what I think positivity is that, we understand that the negativity happens, but there are so many other circumstances that can happen in your life that are good. It's always about having that positive mindset of what comes next, how you can improve, how you can take a break. Um, oh my gosh, but yeah, like going back to what you said, I I'm gonna be real. I applied for the Truman Scholarship. It is this very competitive scholarship for graduate school. And oh my gosh, I kid you not. It's an extensive application, like 20 questions. I spent probably 6 to 7 months on that application every day, looking it over. I had my partner read it like 30 times. I had my mom read it like 20 times. Um, and I didn't get it. It was very frustrating. Like, oh my God, like it was so frustrating because I spent so much time on it. And I think because, like you said, you envision that future with it. And I think that, in our life, I think it has something to also do with like we want stability. And so when we go for things we want, we get it. We're like at this stable place. But like and we don't like to reevaluate, right? And so like if you're not given this opportunity, it's like you have to reevaluate what your life looks like now, and you have to go for something else. Now you feel like you're at square one when you're not, though. You made so much progress. But I think that, when you don't get an opportunity, it's not that, it's not just the opportunity. It's like that piece of you is gone. It's like this identity that you formed in your head of what you were going to be is gone. Yeah, it's very difficult.
I want to end the last part of the conversation by talking by spending more time on mental health activism or
Mhm.
mental health in general, because I know that that's something you care a lot about. And when I think of activism, the first word for some reason that comes into mind is uh well, actually not a word, but more of a phrase, but it's like, who doesn't like me? Any activist, whatever activism you're in, there's always people that will not like what you do.
Oh,
And
yeah.
just because you are passionate about a certain part of activism, it also doesn't mean that you know everything. I'm probably going to say, like, even though you're involved in mental health activism, it's still a learning process. There are things
Oh,
that
yeah.
you need to learn, because it's a
Mhm.
very it's a topic that's not talked about.
Mhm.
When it comes to your activism, I've been asking this question and I worded it so terribly, because I was like, think of your activism or like what you're passionate about as your spouse. I'm gonna ignore that. I'm gonna pretend I didn't ask that question. But what I want to ask is, what is something you don't like about mental health activism that you know you have to do in order to continue the things that you do? Because I kind of like do things. There's two separate things when you start something. It's I want to and I have to. I have to
Mhm.
do this or I want to do this. And if I'm looking at Zane Landin right now, I'm thinking you want to get involved in mental health activism. But as you continue along, there are things that you don't want to do because it's like it's mentally draining, or because
Yeah.
of some existential factors that you don't like, but you have to overcome those obstacles if you want to continue being in this mental health activism. What are some things you don't like about mental health activism, but you have to do because that's just part of what it's like to be a mental health activist?
I don't know. I think mm, I, I don't know. I'm not sure. I'm not sure if I specifically dislike things that I have to do as a mental health advocate, because I'm really an advocate because I want to. I know there are advocates that are doing it out of survival, and so they have to do certain things. I don't have to do anything. Um, there probably was a time in my life where I probably needed to be an advocate more, but I wasn't, unfortunately, especially being an advocate for myself. But when I started being an advocate for myself, things definitely changed in a better way. I don't know. So I would say just sometimes being an advocate is draining itself. Not saying I don't want to be, but there are many times where I'm just like, why am I still doing this? Like I don't know why I'm doing this. The progress is too slow. Some people around me are just not understanding. I feel like things haven't really changed. And so, but I think being a mental health advocate or being a disability advocate, like, holy, like you definitely got to get used to things moving real slow. I mean, especially with those communities that have not been talked about enough at all. And so that's one thing, is just as an advocate itself, sometimes it's very draining, very emotionally exhaustive. And again, if you're at this place where you're starting to experience, if you're like starting to experience like burnout, or like you're being stressed because you're an advocate, it's like, okay, well, you're like, I'm just gonna be real, like it's a little hypocritical in my opinion. Like, and I'm a bit hypocritical with sometimes where I am draining myself, but I'm advocating to others that they need to take care of themselves. But sometimes I'm not. So it's like I'm being a little hypocritical here, and I need to start following my own message. But it's so easy to just get drained, though. It's so easy for it to happen because we want things to happen, we want change to happen, but we also have to take care of ourselves. And again, I think people look at the term hypocritical as so negative. It's not. It's just pointing out that sometimes we don't follow the message that we preach, and sometimes I don't. Sometimes I don't take care of mental health like I should be. But again, it's always an ongoing journey, and as long as you're trying your best, I think that's what's most important.
Absolutely, for sure. Um, I know you are a communication major. Obviously, you're a mental health activist. one of the things that you want to do in the future is combine your passions for both communication and mental health.
Yeah, definitely.
And I want to know what that looks like or what that means, because as an outsider, when I look at this, I think there needs to be more communication when it comes to mental health, because
Oh God, yeah.
it's like, but that's such a, like, for me, that's more of like a broad sense, because there are people that still have yet to really start that conversation, because
I
it's
know.
like there's this weird reason, whatever that is, where they're like, nope, we're not going to talk about it, or we're going to talk about it, but more passively, but we're not going to actually have these conversations. And I want to know from your perspective, when as someone who has passions for these two, what does combining communication and mental health look like for you?
Well, it also means that that you know you can have your conversations in your household and your families and your schools, but that also means that these mental health organizations need to communicate better. So when I'm talking about mental health storytelling, I'm looking at it from the organizational level. That mental health organizations, I think, need to do a better job in reaching the communities they're trying to reach. And so, like, I know so many people that don't know that these resources are free or that there is this grant that can give you access to therapy. And I'm like, yeah, because in my opinion, these organizations do not do enough outreach. They don't communicate with the audiences they need to. And that's unfortunate. And so that's, in my opinion, what it is about just bettering communication strategy within mental health organizations. I know I'm speaking very broadly here, and I'm not talking about, I don't know every single mental health organization. The ones I've worked with, I think that they can, have better communication strategy. And I know they're doing their best. I really do. Like I know because I see their communication plans, I see the work that they're doing. Um, but I think there needs to be a bigger push for communication. There needs to be bigger teams, more resources, investing in more communicators. Because again, if you're putting out amazing resources and you're not communicating them, it's like they don't exist then. And so for me, I already know what that means. To me, it's like I want to be a CCO, which is a chief communications officer. I know that exists. I know a lot of people don't know that. It's a real chief level. Not a lot of organizations have one, but I think it's important. It's like a CMO, chief marketing officer. And so my goal is to be a chief communications officer for a mental health organization. And that's exactly combining the passion because the job function itself is communications, right? And then the passion area is mental health. And so that is a way that I can marry the two in a way where I can make the most impact as a chief level person, making sure that we are directly hitting the audiences that we need to hit, that we're working with the right people, making sure that we're working with the right diverse people, because some things I've noticed about some of these, well, just many organizations, and that a lot of organizations they preach DEI, they preach diversity, equity, inclusion. I'm like, no, you don't, because I still see your board of directors, and your board of directors doesn't have a young person, they don't have a queer person, and so it's like I get that you're preaching that, but also your board of directors needs to reflect that, and a lot of your practices need to reflect your commitment. Because again, that's the theme with communication is like you can communicate what you're doing, but the actions need to reflect the communication. And if it doesn't, that misalignment does not resonate with people anymore. And so I still see that a lot with different organizations. So, anyways, so those were some of the things that I would love to change about, mental health organizations. And again, we're just getting to this territory though, because COVID accelerated the mental health conversation. And so a lot has changed actually when you look at the grand scale of things. So it's like, I understand, like things do take time, and I understand we want things to change now, but things have actually rapidly changed from COVID. Like a positive byproduct of COVID was this need to address mental health in a more positive way, which I'm glad COVID did, despite the horribleness of COVID and what it caused, that it did shine a light on some of these disparities in different communities. And so we have to just kind of pull back sometimes because like we have to look at, things are changing though. Um, but things are rapidly changing in just like the past 3 years. I mean, we wouldn't have some of these conversations if COVID didn't happen. That's very unfortunate that something like that had to change the discourse of everything with mental health. But sometimes things like that do. And it's that's again, that's like the light at the end of the tunnel, kind of.
My last question, this is a question I've been asking my guests lately. You might
Mm-hmm.
like it because we've been talking about words, but
Ooh.
if you could if you could take out one word out of the dictionary because this word has a negative effect on people, What word would that be and why?
Take out a word. Let's see. Hmm. Like take out a word where like it's gone, no one can use it anymore.
Yeah, you can't, like, this word doesn't exist anymore.
Okay, let's see. What word do I not like?
And I can help you. Like, I've had some answers like failure, um, something with like
Huh.
isms, like racism, stuff like that.
No,
Um,
I don't think we need to get rid of those. Definitely not. No, that sounds bad, but it's like we need to be able to describe when that happens. Does that make sense? Like,
yeah,
because the practice isn't gone, just the word, right? I don't
yeah.
know if I'm making, maybe I'm not understanding. So it's like the practice would be gone. So if you get rid of the word racism, that doesn't mean racism goes away, right? Just the word goes away.
I'm talking like, yeah, like any word that has like a negative effect on people. Like if you could take it out, what would that be?
Maybe. Okay. Wow. Okay. Maybe that didn't sound right when I said that. Then, obviously, no to don't be racist. But trying to think of that. I don't know. Because I do like the word failure. I don't like the way it's used though. I think like there's nothing wrong with saying something failed, but yeah, failure is not a bad failure. Is kind of mean though. I need to think. I can't think of one. Actually, I think ignorant is a good one. I don't like the term ignorant, especially way how negatively it's used against people. Because the term ignorant isn't bad, but I think it's used in such a negative, condescending way that people can't reflect on when they're being ignorant. And it's fine if you are ignorant, because it really just means that you don't know something, which is like, it's encouraged. Not that you don't know something, but if you don't know something, explore what that means, learn about something. And so, like, when someone calls you out and says, oh, you probably just don't know about this. You should maybe learn more about this. But I think that the word ignorant is used in such a derogatory way now, to shame people. It's like maybe we can get rid of that and just say, invite the conversation. Let's talk about this. Like you maybe have never heard about this. Let's talk about it. This is my experience. You may not understand it. It doesn't mean you're ignorant. It just means you don't understand, which is okay because I don't understand your experience either, but they don't claim they're ignorant. So it's like, so I would think ignorant is a word that we should get rid of. And then I do want to leave a word that I want people to know about because I just kind of heard about it. It's called hareth. I don't think I'm saying that right, but it's an interesting word that just kind of means this longingness for a world that we used to belong to and we long for it. Kind of like I long for the world where my mom was alive, but they're not there anymore. Or even longing for a world that doesn't exist, like longing to live in a Harry Potter world. That's such an interesting one. That's an interesting word. So that's what I want people to know about. And ignorant as I don't want people to say, or say in a nicer way.
That's a great answer. And I'll be honest with you, I think this is like maybe the sixth or seventh time I've been asking people this question. But essentially, yeah, I'm thinking of what's a word that you don't want to use because you want to, like, you don't want people to follow this term. So, for example, if you were to ask me this question, I would say I would get rid of the word complacency. I think that's the word complete. Is that how you say it? Yeah, complacency, because you want to be challenged. And even though you might not like the challenge, you will thank yourself for experiencing it because it's going to help you in a better way. And as broad as that term is, regardless of what field you're in, you have to be challenging yourself. If you stay complacent, then there's no way to move forward. So I think that's what I was trying to say. Like, you want to get rid of the word because you want to get rid of like the practice that comes with the word. So, um,
Oh,
yeah.
that's so funny because at first I was thinking you're just getting rid of the word. Like that's
No, it's not
it.
like it's like get rid of this word, but the practice still exists. It's like
That's what
get
I
rid of this
thought.
word.
That's why when you said racist, I was like, oh, why would you get rid of the word? It still exists.
Yeah, my bad. That's good to do. Um, I think who was it that said it? I don't remember. I don't remember who said it, but I'll figure it out. But nevertheless, Zane, I know I took a lot of your time, but I just want to say thank you
No,
so
thank
much
you.
for joining the podcast. Thank you for able to share your story, and thank you for being able to share your story in a very unique way. I know positivity is not something that's easy to find, especially with things happening. But if we
Yeah,
can,
really.
yeah, but if we can still try to find a way to look for it and just keep going,
Mhm.
um, we can really succeed, for lack of a better phrase. But nevertheless, thank you for being able to share your story as a mental health advocate and just your journey. And I wish you all the best in the future, and I hope we get to meet in person someday.
Yeah, I hope so too. Thank you for your time and having me on. And yeah, let's stay in contact.
Thank you guys so much for listening to this episode. If you guys like what you saw, be sure to subscribe to this podcast on Apple Podcast, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcast. You can also follow us on Instagram at the OMCG Podcast for more information on guests, preview clips, and more. Please continue to support this podcast in the future, and I can't wait to see you guys in the next episode.